Real story is, if you want a photo, ask. #creepy.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily podcast on fantasy basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and as always you can find me on Twitter at redrock_bball. We are back doing another of the season preview podcasts. I hope you got through all 5 podcasts from yesterday. We've got another 2 coming today and we're going to be looking at a team that is bound to have a lot of fantasy relevance, and it's going to be a really interesting team to watch during the season, a team that a lot is expected of, and that is the Philadelphia 76ers. And to discuss the Philadelphia 76ers, I'm joined by the host of the Locked On Sixers podcast, and that is Keith Pompey. Keith, welcome.
Hey man, thanks for having me on.
It's good to have you back on, and there's a lot to talk about with this Sixers team. A lot changing. The expectations are higher. We can see that just by what Vegas is predicting with the over/under and the win-loss record. Players all expected to take leaps forward. 2 number 1 draft picks debuting in the same season. There's lots of interest with this team for you, especially this season.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, you just think back to 2 years ago. When this team was just talking about tanking to get draft picks, and now you have, some of the elite young guys and young stars in the league, about to make their debut. So, it's a huge 180. I'll say that, just a huge 180.
The Sixers were super fun to watch last year. They're going to be even more fun, I believe, this season to watch. They were a team that I watched, I'd say almost more than any other team, maybe Denver and Golden State, just for fun factor, and it's going to be ramped up even further this season. But we'll start, Keith, by talking about the players that actually they acquired this season, and the number 1 guy who's likely going to just slot into that starting shooting guard role is JJ Redick, who came across on that 1-year, $20 million plus contract. He moves straight into that starting shooting guard role. He's going to have a very similar role, I believe, to what we saw from him in LA, but I don't think people should be expecting massive loads of minutes because he is older than I think some people might expect.
Yeah, he's older than some people might expect. However, I mean, when you look at the 76ers, and especially from a fantasy standpoint, typically guys, their point production is better than you would expect. But just because of the Sixers' wide open situation, they score a lot of points. I think that JJ Redick, although he is older than most people suspect, I think that he will score a lot of points. He will get a lot of options. He'll get a lot of opportunities. So I'm expecting JJ Redick to have a great year statistically. You know what I mean? As far as that, and also you factor in that you're saying he's going to be this starting 2 guard. He may be the 3. You never know, but if they go small, but at the same time, you're going to have a guy who you are extremely familiar with in Ben Simmons, who is going to look for JJ Redick a lot because he knows, he's a guy who's going to knock down a lot of shots and bring up Simmons' assists. So, I'm not down on JJ Redick. I think he's going to have a pretty good year.
Redick's going to be a guy that's going to be the recipient of a lot of those. Think LeBron when you think of those cross-court whipping type passes. That's what Simmons can deliver, and Redick's going to be just wide open for those sort of things. So it's a realistic expectation to think that Redick could hit over 3 threes a game. I don't have him quite at that level, but he could easily do that. He only played 28 minutes a game last season for the Clippers. Maybe he gets another extra minute there this year. His points are going to be nice. His threes are going to be nice. We know he's an excellent free throw shooter, but he's not doing much in the other areas. But in terms of getting someone late to get the 3-pointers, Redick's going to have so many opportunities to do that. He's never been asked to create much offense of his own, like off the dribble or create for others, but he's going to be there spotting up as people draw themselves to Simmons, to Fultz, to Joel Embiid, and he's just going to be there being able to feast on all this and put up some really good numbers. And I think if you're counting 3-point percentage in your leagues, Redick's going to be one of those guys who gets a significant boost. So he's a later round guy, but those threes and points are going to be really valuable from a guy like JJ. Now, a player who is another veteran presence that comes across, and I'm really interested to hear your take on this, Keith, because yesterday, myself and Kyle from Basketball Monster, we were debating the Sixers' backup big man situation, and Amir Johnson came across like JJ Redick on a 1-year deal, just $11 million for Amir. He struggled at times last year. He's had persistent ankle problems. Where do you see Amir fitting in on this team? Is he an every night first big off the bench for the backup centre, or is that going to Rashawn Holmes? Or where is Johnson fitting into this rotation?
I think he's more of a wow, it's tough depending on what type of lineup they go with. Because let's just say if the 76ers would really want J.J. Redick and Markelle Fultz and both together in the starting lineup with Ben Simmons, that means on the defensive end, Ben Simmons would have to slide to the 4, right? So that means you have to bring Dario Saric off the bench, and he would probably be the 6th man. So Amir would slide down. Like in that scenario, I think Amir would be, I hate to say it, but he'll be a situational player. His minutes, like as you said, he had the ankle problems. So he probably, it would be one of those things where the Sixers would want to rest him in case they really need his veteran leadership, the things that he can do. But I think a lot of it depends on what they're going to do with the 2 guards. And if they start both of them, and the 2 guards, I'm talking about Redick and Fultz, and if they start both of them together, Amir's minutes are going to take a huge hit.
Like I think it's going to be, you're going to have Simmons and you're going to have Saric backing him up, then you're going to have Embiid at centre. But is Johnson ahead of Rashawn Holmes, do you think, for that backup role behind Embiid?
Well, I think that right now, from what I'm hearing, they're really looking at Amir more as a 4.
Okay.
You know what I mean? As a 4. So, I think that Rashawn Holmes will get it. But here's something else that we have to factor in. Like, if as long as Jahlil Okafor remains on the team, he's going to be the backup 5 because and he's probably going to get some minutes just because of the fact that they're going to probably want to trade him. If they don't trade him, it's just because they weren't unable to. So at least early in the season, he's going to be a guy that's going to get a lot of minutes. He's going to get a lot of plays. He's going to get a lot of things because they're going to want him to showcase himself early on. So if he's still on the team, he's going to be, talking about Okafor, he's going to be the backup, and then it's going to be Rashawn Holmes. And I think that Amir will be more like a situational guy, at the 4. He'll play some 5, but I look at him more as a power forward.
Okay. That's interesting about Okafor, because I thought that Holmes had pretty clearly overtaken him last year as that backup centre, but you think that just with him being a little bit healthier with his knees, they're just going to be getting him out there early and seeing if he can do anything to rehab his image?
I think it's more of a thing where, I agree with you with Rashawn Holmes, but I think it's more of a thing is like it's kind of hard trying to trade the 3rd string center.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So it's one of those where, if from a fantasy standpoint, early on, if there's times, you need somebody to, come off the bench or a utility guy, he's going to be the guy for you just because they need to showcase him. They need to showcase him to make sure that they can, get what they deem is equal value for him. So it's not a matter of, him being better than Rashawn or Rashawn being better than him. It's just the fact that, that's just what happens, when they're just trying to trade players. So he's going to get ample opportunity.
The other guy that they brought across this season was Furkan Korkmaz, who was the first-round draft choice last season. I find it that it's going to be almost impossible for him to get minutes in this wing rotation. He's going to be playing with Delaware most of the season, would be my guess. But the amount of guys, like we've obviously got the starters there in Covington and Redick, and then we've got Luwawu Cabarrot, Stauskas, Justin Anderson, Jarrett Bayless, all these other wings and guards who are ahead of him. So I don't think we're going to be seeing much of Korkmaz, even though he was impressive in Vegas at times. His shooting was nice. He's got good size. But we're just not going to see enough of him this season, are we?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, he's a guy who, and a lot of people, it's kind of like things change. But initially, the team felt it would be best for him to stay this season overseas for another year. That way, they wouldn't have to worry about rotation and stuff like that. But what they're going to do with him is, he's going to be on the roster, but he's going to spend a chunk of time down in the development league. So it's going to be one of those things, like you said, I don't really see him at this particular time, getting in the mix. Now, there may be some games where they throw him out there, like late game type of situations. But, at this time, it's just that he's a good project, but that's just what he is right now, a project.
Yeah, we're just not going to see much from him. Look, he's going to be a guy that could potentially, in time, move into that JJ Redick position as that 3-point shooting 2 or 3, and that's, I think, what they want to envisage for him down the track, but we're just not going to see enough of it this season for it really to have any sort of impact. The guys that left this team, not a huge list of, or important players anyway. Sergio Rodriguez has gone, Alex Poitras went to Indiana on a 2-way deal, Gerald Henderson was waived, and he looks like he might not ever play again with his hip issue, which is just something to remember when we consider Isaiah Thomas's hip. Sean Long and Tiago Splitter are all gone from last season, but let's get to the draft. This is where a lot of interest is happening, Keith, and Markelle Fultz with the number 1 selection. Pretty much a unanimous number 1 choice there, unless you're Danny Ainge. Fultz comes in. He will be the starting point guard. I don't think there's any debate about that. I have heard people mention before, they're going to limit his minutes and they're going to sit him on back-to-backs. And to me, that's just complete rubbish. I see no reason. That's not something... The Sixers do it when players are actually injured. They don't just routinely sit their young guys for no purpose. There's no cap on what Fultz can do this year, is there?
No, there's not. I mean, and the thing is, I think that, it's going to be a great situation for him. I look at him as in regards to like fantasy and stuff like that. They're different type of players, but I look at him as in regards to like an Otto Porter role. And what I mean by that is he's a guy, he's not going to take the most of the shots. He's not going to have the ball in his hand most of the time. I mean, even though he is a point guard, but you realize you have Ben Simmons who's going to be the primary ball handler. But at the same time, he's going to take advantage of not having to have the pressure on his hands. He's not always going to be defended by the top defender. You understand? You understand what I'm saying? So it's like, it's going to be, now again, he's still a rookie. He's still going to like go through the ups and downs as a rookie. But at the same time, I do believe that his being the third option on this team offensively is only going to help him, and it's going to help the Sixers, and he's going to be able to take advantage of mismatch.
He's not afraid to take his shot, which is going to work out well for fantasy. And I think you've got to consider him similar to the way we saw point guards in Denver last season, or in Denver. So you got Nikola Jokic running things and the passing, and the point guards there in a sort of secondary playmaker type of role, which I think is what you'll see with Fultz alongside Simmons. And they'll split that duty handling the ball, but both of those guys will be getting their assist numbers. You're not going to see a point guard in Philly getting 8 assists per game, but they'll get a few more shots off. They'll be used more as 3-point shooters, where Simmons is spotting them up, and then they can switch that ball handling responsibility. And then when they're staggering lineups, when Fultz is in there without Simmons, he'll get more of his assists that way. He's currently being drafted at like pick 78 in Yahoo, and I think that's fine value. He does have top 50 upside. It's probably going to be a little bit of a stretch for him to get there, but in those mid to late rounds, if you didn't go point guard early, which is a great strategy, grabbing Fultz there is fine, because he does have the ability to be 14, 15 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists. He blocks shots at a really high rate for a point guard, like sensationally highlight type blocks. He gets steals. The problem he's going to have is his shooting percentages, Keith, because he's a poor free throw shooter. Rookies always struggle from the field, and nothing that we're seeing here is going to make us say he's going to come in and be this historically efficient rookie.
Exactly. You're exactly right. And like you're saying, where he's slotted at right now, I think that's a good value pick. You know what I mean? Because it's like there's not a lot of pressure. And so, his ceiling is high there. It's not like you're looking for him to be the leading scorer, to do all these other things. But at the same time, that's 14 points a game that he's going to give you, and you're going to get a lot of assists. So I think that, right where he is right now, I think that that's a steal for Markelle Fultz. Yeah. And I think that it's only going to get better as the season goes along.
Yeah, that's standard for rookies. That once we head to February, March, April, their play increases significantly. I wrote an article about that last week, and you can see like all their rankings go from like 170 to 70 pre and post All-Star break. We're talking a 60 to 100 spot improvement in that first 3 months versus the final 3 months. And I don't think that Fultz will be any different there. They also drafted Andres Pasechniks in the first round. He's not coming over this year, the big Latvian center. I said this the other day that Kristaps Porzingis. He's not a 3-point shooting threat. He's not a rim protector. He is a down low, get your high percentage looks from inside sort of player. I don't think he's got tremendously high fantasy upside. Obviously, the Sixers still have a ton of centers, and he's not coming in and replacing Joel Embiid at any time soon, so don't get too interested there. They also took a couple of big guys in the second round. Mateus Lesor, the big man from France, he's also not coming over, but again, I don't know where his role fits. But the guy I am really interested in, Keith, is another Aussie, and that's Jonah Bolden, who looked fantastic in Summer League. If the Sixers had the roster spot this season, I'm sure he would have been over because he would have been able to contribute at least a little bit, but he's going to be back in Europe this season. And I would imagine that when Amir Johnson leaves at the end of this season or his contract's up, then Bolden can sort of slide into that role for next season. But we saw him as a 3-point shooting, shot-blocking guy who is going to struggle with strength and rebounding, but he does have an intriguing fantasy skill set. And I'm sure you were pretty impressed with what you saw from him in the summer leagues.
Pretty, man. That's an understatement. I mean, the thing about when you look at Jonah Bolden, the thing that you hear of is like, okay, here's a guy who can shoot the three. He's extremely athletic, this and that. But his overall game is I think, is underrated, because he can do a lot of things. I mean, a lot of things. His defense is good. I mean, this summer in the summer league, he was supposed to be, like I said, a 3-point shooter, and that's it. But he was blocking shots. He was their best rim protector. So, it's one of those things where a lot of the fans in Philadelphia were a little disappointed that, hey, what you mean he's going overseas? Like, we want to see him now. But again, he's going to go there. He's going to get stronger. But they have guys like Amir on a 1-year contract, and all that's doing is setting it up for the time for him to come and then be a rotation guy. Now, again, is he a starter in this league? Not at this particular time. But what he can be for the 76ers is a guy, a rotation big that's going to bring a lot of energy, and it's going to be a matchup problem. So, yeah, I'm very impressed with him. I mean, very, very, very impressed.
It is going to be hard, you're right, for him to become a starter because Simmons, Šarić, Embiid, they're the guys that are playing his position. And that's fine. But he is also a guy that can come over, play 20 minutes, and actually be an impactful fantasy guy because he can block 1.5 shots in that time, hit 1.5 threes, get some steals, score a little bit. He can do it in a very similar way to what Richaun Holmes can do in 22 minutes. They can be useful. A guy like Dwayne Dedmon in Atlanta who in limited minutes can put up decent numbers. Bolden is a really interesting guy, and when we're talking about dynasty rookie drafts, he should be going significantly higher than what his actual draft slot was, which I think was 36 or 35. He should be going inside that top 30, maybe the top 25, just in terms of overall ability and overall fantasy value. So he is a guy that you should be looking at. Now, Keith, I want to get to probably the most important part of this whole preview show, and that's talking about the injuries for the Philadelphia 76ers. And if we're going to talk injuries, we have to start with Joel Embiid. We all know he played 31 games last year, but I don't want to focus on that. I want to focus on where his knee is at now because we don't really have a clear picture. We keep hearing that he's not cleared for full 5-on-5 activity, but he hopes to be back for training camp. Like, what's the latest word on Embiid's status for opening night, let's say?
I mean, I think they're extremely optimistic that he's going to play opening night. A lot of it, it's weird because, yes, he has not been cleared for 5-on-5. However, the team and Embiid and everyone was leaking out these workouts of him doing full court, highly impactful, workouts, where, it lets you know that he can do 5-on-5. Now, again, is his conditioning, can he do it like for an extended period of time, or how does his knee swell up afterwards? But, it just seems as if that he's right on pace. And, there has been a thought that, the reason why he wasn't cleared is because what the Sixers wanted to do was they wanted their doctors to look at him, like once the guys are reporting this week and next week in preparation of training camp. So that could be it. But, I think that if healthy, I think that he will, be a terror this year. You already know that. But in regards to it, I'm not really concerned about the injury. I think that we'll find out more once training camp comes. And if he's not like able to do stuff during training camp and towards like a couple weeks later, that's when we have to, ring the alarm bell, so to speak. But at this particular time, I think is a lot to do with the Sixers weren't really around to see him. And it's just like the Ben Simmons situation. Ben Simmons, we all felt like could have, started doing his 5-on-5 like once the season was over. But it just seems like the Sixers held him out. Not the doctors, but the Sixers held him out because they just wanted to be cautious.
I'm glad you said that about Embiid because I'm not really overly worried about his knee here either. On a per game basis, I've got him as a first round fantasy pick, and he has got top 5 fantasy upside, and this is in limited minutes. Now, back to backs, the Sixers have 14 of them this year. Keith, do you think that they will continue along that path of sitting him out all 14 of those back to backs, or do you think it's maybe an up until Christmas thing and let's monitor how it goes?
Yeah, I think a lot of it will. I think we'll find out a lot, like more, towards the tail end of training camp. They'll sit around and see how he's responding to it. Because Brian Colangelo, the 76ers president of basketball operations, came out and said that he felt that Embiid would be able to play in all the back-to-backs. Brett Brown, the head coach, a guy who everyone in Australia is familiar with, he really wasn't 100% sure. But at the same time, I think a lot of it's going to have to deal with, what happens, towards the tail end of training camp.
I wouldn't be too concerned about what Brett Brown says about injuries. He came out and said that he expected Ben Simmons to be on minutes restrictions and not play back-to-backs, and then that's not going to be the case. Embiid, I think a lot of people look at him and go, he was restricted all last season. He was on a 24-minute restriction, which at the start of December was lifted. It lasted like 4 weeks, and then he went up to 28 minutes, and then he was playing at an insane level, and then he got injured. So it wasn't like they were being cautious, but they weren't being ridiculously cautious, and they bumped that minutes limit up straight away. I think he will have some sort of a limit this year. But Keith, if I was to ask you if he plays more or less than 50 games this year, what would you go, over or under?
I'm being optimistic. I think it's going to be over. Yep. I mean, I really do. And also, here's another thing. Again, we don't know now. Again, he'll probably play some minutes, but at the same time, they also do have like an Amir Johnson. They have some other guys who will enable him to get rest in certain situations. You know what I mean? Like before, like if you took him out the game, it was horrible. Like it kept surrendering leads and stuff like that. So I think that he'll be able to rest a little bit. So whereas it's going to give him, enable him to stay healthier, and play, more games than he has, in the past.
I don't think he's getting the 30 minutes a game, but I think he's going to be playing more than last year. As I said, it is a risk as to where you take him, but the first round talent there is undeniable. He's going at pick 36 on ESPN, which is factoring in that risk. I'd be more than happy to take him there in most situations. Yahoo at 29, I'd be fine. I'm okay at the start of the third round, depending on what I've done in the first 2 rounds of taking, because if you take him and he plays 65 games, then you've pretty much won the league. Like that's pretty much all over. If he plays 65, if he plays 40, then you've maybe lost it. But you can recover from that. But the upside there is just gigantic. We're talking about, at pick 30, you can get a guy who is the 10th best player, and that's significantly valuable at that point. So here's an interesting one. Now, I did reference Simmons. He played some pickup games down here in Melbourne when he was here, just filling in for one of his mates' teams at the YMCA down here. We're not worried about minutes restrictions from him. I'm not worried about back-to-backs from him. People go, he's injured, he missed the whole season. It was a fluke injury, Keith. It wasn't a load-bearing injury. It wasn't, he's too big for his feet. The dude twisted his ankle, the ligament ripped a chunk of bone off the side. That's it. That happened to Kevin Durant. That's the sort of thing that happens. So I'm not worried at all about Simmons' foot. Do you have any level of concern with it?
No, not at all. I mean, I think that I think that the Sixers were being extremely precautious. I mean, it got to a point to whereas, they wanted to make 100% sure that it was totally healed. And that's the reason why that, he wasn't playing, and then I think if it was like, 5, 6, 7 years ago, he would have been on the court. But with the latest technology, they were able to tell that it wasn't 100% healed. And then once it was, then that's when he started resuming basketball activities. I think that Ben Simmons is going to have a great year. The biggest question mark is, can he hit the three? knock down outside jumpers because a lot of teams are going to play him differently. But in regards to a motivation factor, I mean, think of Ben Simmons. For the first time in his life, people are questioning him, like really basically doubting him. I mean, when the draft came, everyone was saying, hey, this is going to be Markelle Fultz's team, it's Embiid's team, it's going to be JJ Redick. People weren't talking about Ben Simmons. So Ben Simmons has, you know, a chip on his shoulder that the size of Mount Everest. You know what I mean? This guy is going to be motivated and he's going to be in attack mode. And he already said, no, everyone's talking about rookie of the year. My goal is to become the league MVP. And I think that he's going to have a phenomenal rookie season because of that.
He does get pretty pissy at things like that, so I do believe that he is going to be pretty aggressive. If I had to say, we'll do another over under with you, Keith. Over under 10 3-pointers made for Simmons this year.
I want to say over.
Okay.
I mean, because and I know a lot of people are like, hey, what are you talking about? But I think that he's going to take a lot, and it's not well. What I mean by a lot, I'm not going to say a lot for like JJ Redick and people like that. But I think that Ben Simmons he has to get more confident. And early on when you look at it, it was kind of like it was he put me in mind of a player who just wasn't confident in taking that shot, and he was so good in doing other things to where he didn't have to do it. I think now that he realizes in order for him to keep teams honest, he's going to have to shoot three. Now, I don't know what his percentage is going to be like, but I think we're going to have some nights where he's going to be on. He's going to be on fire, and people are going to give it to him. And then Brett Brown and the other people are going to say, look, man, you gotta shoot it. You have to shoot it. If you don't make it, who cares? We need you to shoot it to keep people honest. So I think that he'll make more than 10 3-pointers.
I think what you said there is 100% correct, and that's what I've heard from people in the Simmons camp as well. It's not that he can't shoot; it's that he's never needed to shoot. He can do everything else so well. Yeah. He gets to the rim, he sets everyone else up, he just barrels over everyone. He just never needed to do it, but people make out that he is just this horrendous Rajon Rondo type level shooter, and he just isn't. Like, he can knock down these shots, he just never has to, and it is going to be a confidence thing. But once the confidence comes, he won't be hitting them at 35%. I don't think anyone's thinking that, but he's also not going to be DeAndre Bembering things and hitting 1-3 for an entire season. He can shoot. It is a confidence thing, and it's a fact that he's just never needed to ever display. Like, he never needed to do that at LSU. He just was able to get to the rack whenever he wanted to and set up guys whenever he wanted to. Yeah, sure, it would have been nice for him to do that, but his whole game has just never been based on that. So he is getting drafted pretty high at pick 53, which I think is probably a little bit aggressive, especially like he hasn't been a great free throw shooter, and that's going to hold him back. But if you came to me, Keith, and said at the end of the year he's averaged 15, 9, and 7 with 1.5 steals, I don't think that'd be a crazy number for me to look at. Like, he could even do more than that. Like, he's got that upside. So if you do really believe in it, then you might have to take him there. But I have seen him slide into the 60s and even the 70s, and that's a pretty solid position as long as you're aware of his strengths and weaknesses in those fantasy categories. Jared Bayless missed pretty much all of last season with a wrist injury. I think he played 2 games maybe. Let's have a look.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
3?
3. Okay. He played 3 games. Now, he was signed on that $9 million deal to come and be, like, the idea was he was going to be the starting point guard and be that point guard who's sort of stayed there and spotted up and hit threes and created, while Simmons was the actual, the point guard as such. Now that his role changes this year with Fultz there, with Redick there, but do you believe that Bayless will be the primary backup to Fultz, or do you think that with TJ McConnell's level of play last year that Bayless is going to be pushed down to a third string guy who just doesn't see the court all that often?
Now, I think he'll be the primary backup, but I also see him, getting a lot of minutes in regards to being, he could be the 6th man or the 7th man, depending on which way they go. I'm leaning more towards the 6th man if they start like a small lineup. He's the guy. I mean, when you talk to the people with the 76ers, they love him, and the reason why they wanted him is because they felt like he could play next to Ben Simmons. You know what I mean? Ben Simmons could have the ball, and he could play off the ball, but he can also guard point guards. And also, he's a shooter. He's a guy who, came into the league, worked on his shot, Now he's one of the league's premier 3-point shooters. So with that being said, he's going to be a guy that's going to be in a rotation. He's going to get a lot of minutes, as many as he can, depending on the other two guys they have. But he's going to be out there, and he's going to be like, I hate to say it, but he's probably their most important reserve on the team right now. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, and buts. He's the most important reserve on their team.
I agree with you that he is going to be the primary backup and play a significant role, playing at the 1, playing at the 2, alongside Simmons, alongside Fultz, replacing Fultz. He is going to be a key guy, and he's pretty much forgotten now. He's not going to have a huge fantasy impact. He's not going to be playing 27 or 28 minutes a night.
Yeah.
But I do believe that he will be playing more than TJ McConnell, and that should be, people are... TJ McConnell's got an average draft position of 149 on Yahoo and 140 on ESPN, and that makes zero sense. There is absolutely no way that you should be looking at TJ McConnell in any sort of standard fantasy league, or probably even 20-team fantasy league. I just don't. I see that Bayless is going to be ahead of him, and he is really a forgotten player at this point. Dario Saric is another guy that people have a lot of debate about. I've heard people saying that they're going that Saric will start at the 3 ahead of Covington, and he's going to do this, and he's being drafted at pick 62 on Yahoo and 66 on ESPN, and I cannot see him cracking the top 100, maybe not even the top 150, because he just isn't going to see the amount of minutes that he saw last year. He is going to be behind Simmons. He's going to be behind Embiid. He played some center last year. He had that strong stretch in February and March, but a lot of people don't realize, and I say this all the time, that he struggled in November and December. He struggled in April. He was really worn down, and he just isn't at the level of those guys, and he's not going to be demanding the same playing time. Can you set people straight once and for all, or maybe set me straight if I'm wrong? He's not starting for this team, is he?
No, I don't see it. I mean, and then sometimes you hear that, that some people think that he deserved the right to be in the starting lineup. But when you think about it, again, when he was the starter early on, he and Joel Embiid just didn't mesh.
Yeah.
What I mean? Embiid needs to be out there with a shooter. And then also, Dario, playing the 3, I don't know if he can guard threes. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if he can guard them, like, basically consistently enough to be able to say that he's going to start over a Robert Covington. Let's face it, Robert Covington at this particular time is a better shooter than he is, right? They're around the same height, and Robert Covington is a way better defender than he is. And when you have a team that already has, like, scorers and stuff like that in the starting lineup, you look at a guy like Dario who will be better suited, like coming off the bench. Like I said, he and along with Jared Bayless can be 2 of the elite go-to guys on that second unit. And I feel as if that 76ers will be better off playing him in that role. Now, again, I know that he had a great, like people said, he made a great charge, as far as like, rookie of the year and this and that. But again, there wasn't any Embiid on the floor.
Yep.
And I think that once he gets on the floor with Embiid, it gets a little bit too crowded back there. So I don't see it, and I don't see the foot speed, like I said before, for him to play the 3.
Yeah.
So I'm with you on that one.
Yeah, to me, it's as straightforward as anything there is, but you do see it come out. And look, let's not mince words. You said that Covington's a way better defender than him. Robert Covington is an elite perimeter defender. He is one of the top. I thought he should have been an all-defensive player last year. I think he is one of the top 5 perimeter wing defenders. I think he led ESPN's defensive real plus-minus for small forwards. He was ahead of Kawhi Leonard in that category. He is an elite defender, and now with these, they need that. They need someone who can go in there and just shut down other players. Yes, exactly. He struggled with his shooting percentage, but he is going to have things opened up now when you got Simmons, Embiid, Fultz all surrounding him, and everyone's going to be scrambling to cover those guys. Covington's just going to sit out there. He's going to bomb his threes. He's going to get steals at a tremendous rate. Yep. He's a weak side shot blocker. He can come in and help there. Maybe his rebounds do decrease playing alongside Simmons. That's a possibility. His game's never been predicated on high usage. It's about getting steals. It's about getting blocks. It's about hitting threes. And he is significantly undervalued in the real NBA, and he's getting drafted around pick 70 in fantasy, which I think he can be a top 50 guy. You don't need to take him at 50, but at 60, you want to get those elite steals along with blocks, boards, threes. and high free throw percentage. Covington's getting the minutes. He is as good as it gets on the perimeter, and I'm glad that you've agreed with me with this, because he is very, very good, and it's going to be interesting to see what they end up doing with his contract at the end of this season, actually.
Yeah, believe me, I think that he's going to get paid because of the things that you said. You know, like he's a guy who's not going to be an all-star. He's not going to get the headlines. You know, he's not going to get the. At the end of the game, the media is not going to rush over and say, "Hey, Robert Covington, what do you feel about this win?" But the Sixers are smart enough to realize that he is going to be their glue guy. He's a 3-and-D. That's what they want. A guy who's going to defend and a guy who's going to knock down open 3-point shots. And that's his role. And I think that, if they're really, interested in building a championship contender, then he's going to be someone that they're going to, take care of. Now, again, is he going to get a max deal? Is he going to do this and that? No. But at the same time, I think that, he's going to get a respectable, a deal that's worthy of someone of his caliber.
Can you tell your mates over there in Philly to stop booing him every time he misses a shot then?
Man, you know what? It's funny. It's funny, but that's the crazy thing, because they were booing the heck out of him, and then he made one shot to win the game.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? And then all of a sudden it was like Covington for mayor. You know what I mean? Mayor and president. It was like everyone forgot that they were calling him an idiot like a week ago. You know what I mean? But that's Philadelphia. That's what we love this place. Is people wear their hearts on their sleeves, so to speak. But hey, they love him now. Now they call him Big Shot Rob again.
Now, we're talking about wings, and I think the backup wing situation is relatively confusing. We're going to have Redick, we're going to have Covington starting, we're going to have Bayless play there, but you've got this trio of guys, and all three of them aren't going to be in the rotation every night. I'm talking about Sauce Castillo, Nick Stauskas, Timothé Luwawu-Cabarrot, and Justin Anderson. One of those guys, at least, is going to be out of the rotation on most nights, and they might rotate that. How do you think it plays out? Now, Stauskas played a lot of minutes last year, like 27, 28 a night. He was playing backup point guard at times when everyone was going down. He played at the 2 and 3. He took a real step up. Justin Anderson came across in the Nerlens-Noel trade. He's the biggest out of this group and probably profiles as the guy that can come in and sub Covington out and provide at least some size on the wing. And then Luwawu-Cabarrot was really hot down the stretch, playing 30-plus minutes a night. But he is a smaller guy and he struggled in summer league. So out of those three guys, how do you see their roles playing out this year, and who's going to get that opportunity and who's going to be sort of left out in the cold?
I think the person who's really going to be left out in the cold is Timothé Luwawu. And the reason being is because when you look at Nick Stauskas, you have to really make a decision on him. He's coming up in the contract year. You want to see if it's one of those things where if it can really work out with him, give him another opportunity, because he did play a little bit, but he played better last year than he did the previous 2 seasons. And then secondly, you want to see if there's one of those things that maybe a team might say, hey, let's see if we could take him off your hands. And, I also believe that he can do more for the Sixers than a Timothé Luwawu. I like Tim, but I kind of think that Tim kind of regressed a little over the summer. Like he did, yes, you're right. He did come on strong in at the latter part of the season. But in summer league, the thing that improved was his 3-point shot. But it just seems like he had a hard time like converting at the rim. It seems like his defense still didn't get any better. Like he's lost on certain plays. And the fact that he's still young, I think that they can use this as a learning opportunity and send him back down to the D-League. Again, even though it sounds strange that he was a starter last year, but I think that, he will be better suited going down there, learning and developing more. And you look at a guy like Justin Anderson, and you may argue that of the three, that his skill set is the least effective in regards to what the Sixers want. However, he's an extremely high energy guy. He's a guy who he can, like you said, he can be Robert Covington's backup, but also he's proven that he's strong enough and versatile enough that if they want to go small, he could play power forward in certain situations. So the fact that he's also shed 15 pounds off his frame lets me know that he's dedicated. And I really believe that, because of this, he can do a lot of intangible things that whereas you can put him on the floor with a lot of shooters and stuff like that, and he will be out there and he will excel in that role. So I know I'm going long winded with it, but I think if I had, if it was the three, the person who really would be left out in the cold will be Timothy Luwalu.
I agree with that. Like, I think that Anderson is pretty much locked in just because of his size and what he can do there. And I keep going back and forth between Stauskas and Luwawu-Cabarrot. One thing I do think is if Redick has to miss time, I think that they'll put Luwawu-Cabarrot straight into that starting lineup because I believe that him and his offensive cutting ability fits perfectly with what Simmons can do. We saw him in Summer League last year. Him and Simmons had a fantastic chemistry. He knows, it's almost like a Gary Harris, extremely light, just knows when to move, really active, never stops moving offensively, and with Simmons and Fulton and Embiid around there, he's going to be able to find those spaces. But in a situation where everyone's healthy, then I don't see him having that similar role of being able to mesh with a Jared Bayless or a TJ McConnell. It's just not going to work as well for him in that situation. So I think he'd be one of those guys that's out of the rotation, but if a starting spot opened, I reckon he would move ahead of Stauskas and play his 25-26 and really work well off of Simmons and Embiid. But we've clearly got to wait for certain things to happen there. But that's how I see it with him because I just really like what he can do offensively with his movement.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, offensively, he just needs to. I think he just needs to convert a little bit more. Like again, you can tell he's been working on his shot and he's been hitting 3-pointers, but it just seems like getting to the rim, he just had a hard time converting. And summer league is great to show that things you can do, but then you also have to factor in that you're not going up against a Justin Anderson type of guy, and or like in most cases elite NBA talent. You're going up against free agents and rookies. So it's one of those things where they had great chemistry, but I would like to see how would he fit in when you have like a JJ Redick on the floor and other type players. And right now I think that he just needs to. Nothing against him. He's still young. He just needs to mature a little bit in regards to basketball, maturation, develop a little bit more.
Who's your breakout candidate on this team, Keith? You can phrase that however you want. You can use whatever criteria you want to define that. But who do you think's a breakout guy?
Wow. I would come out and say Ben Simmons, just because of I think that he's motivated. But if you want to take it off of a person who's not expected, to start, I want to say Jared Bayless, because I think that, Jared Bayless, I mean, I think that he was in line to, I'm not going to say he have a big season last year, but he was in line for the first time of his career to really get an opportunity to showcase what he could do. And I think that the fact that he didn't play, became, so to speak, the forgotten one. And I feel as if that when he gets on the court and he's going to get these opportunities, opportunities, he's going to showcase all the reasons why that, Brian Colangelo was adamant about bringing him to Philadelphia. So I think that Jared Bayless is going to be the breakout guy. Now, it may not factor in, Jared Bayless having high scoring nights and killing stat sheets. However, but I think that, his productivity is going to really stand out to people in regards to for what he's doing in minutes played. I think he's going to have a really good year.
If I look at some guys who I think are, value fantasy guys, I really like Covington at pick 71 and 70. I think he can be a top 50 sort of a guy, but I think there's a few players on this team that are a little bit overrated. And I already talked about Šarić at 62 and 66 being a ridiculous pick, and you shouldn't be looking at it there. Simmons at 53 is maybe a little bit higher, but I can understand that. I wouldn't take him there, but I can understand that. Jahlil Okafor at 117, I just see no way that you would have any idea of picking Okafor there. It just doesn't make any sense. But a guy that a lot of people are talking about is Rashawn Holmes, and people are saying, if I grab Embiid, I'm going to have to reach early and go into the 9th round, or pick 90 to grab Holmes just to be certain that I've got the backup there. But as you said, like, that backup role is not certain. There's Okafor that can play there, there's Johnson that can play there, and I just do not agree with handcuffing Embiid with Holmes in that sort of a situation, because I think if you have to take him with your 8th pick or your 9th pick, I think you're wasting a really valuable pick there with Holmes. He could play, he could start if Embiid goes down and play 25 a night and be a top 80 guy, and we saw that last season. I love what he can do. I love his fantasy value, his shot blocking threes, rebounding, scoring. I love everything that he can do, but taking him as early as some people are suggesting, it just doesn't make sense to me because of that uncertainty with how that role is going to go, Keith. And I'm sure you loved what he did last year, but it's just not set in stone at this point, is it?
No, it's not. And another thing is set in stone is how many minutes is he going to get? I mean, the thing about Rashawn Holmes is, like, Rashawn Holmes is a good guy. He's really productive when he gets in there, but there's games where he doesn't even play. You know what I mean? And I think that, a lot of people are thinking that, okay, they got rid of Nerlens Noel, but like you said, they brought in Amir Johnson. So it's going to be a similar situation for him. And then the thing about it is he is a good ball player. No question about that. But, right now he's still a young ball player in regards to NBA, years of experience. So there are certain type of guys that he can excel against, like the more bigger, the bigger type centers, because Rashawn Holmes, let's face it, he's listed as 6'11", but he's really like 6'9". But sometimes he has problems when he goes up against other athletic deer type of centers. So, and maybe that's why he doesn't always see the floor sometimes. So I think that, for him, it's possibly for him to have a breakout year, but there's so much standing in his way, that he may not get the opportunity to. You know what I mean? So, I'm kind of with you there.
Let's talk about Vegas, who's got the over-under at 42.5. We're talking about a 14-win increase from last season, which is significantly high. It's huge. They're obviously expecting the Sixers to make the playoffs. Do you take the over or under on that 42.5? Because we're relying on a guy, Embiid, who's played 31 games, and Simmons and Fultz, who haven't played at all, and a whole new starting five.
At this particular time, I would have to say the under. And it's not a knock against the 76ers, and I get that why everyone's excited about that. But when you factor in that, you're going to have Ben Simmons, a guy who who has yet to play even in the NBA preseason game, and you're pairing him against Markelle Fultz, who, is fresh out of college, they're your two primary ball handlers, and they're both rookies, and then, you're talking about Embiid. He only played 31 games. I project that he will play more, but, it's just the team, the core. These three guys are the face of the franchise, and they're one guy you have to worry about the health. The other two guys, it's going to take them time to develop in this league. So I feel like, they will be in the hunt for a playoff spot towards the tail end of the season. But for people to say that, oh, yeah, they're going to win more than 42 games, I find that a little bit of, just being a little bit of wishful thinking, because they haven't proven anything on the floor yet that they can get there. And I have to take the under because of that.
Yeah, I'd take that. Look, I think if they got to 39 games, that's definitely a more realistic proposition, and that's something that I could see. But that's still 3 wins under that, so I would take the under on that. But say they got to 39, okay, do you think that, regardless of this over, do you think they make the playoffs?
I see. That's the thing is, I think they'll be in the hunt for the last week. I'm not sure if they'll get there. I mean, first of all, you look at the schedule early on, and see that's. So you're going to have a young team. They play 10 of their first 14 games on the road, something like that. 10 of the first 14 games on the road, and we're not talking about they're going to Milwaukee, they're going to Sacramento, they're going to Brooklyn. We're talking about they have to go to Toronto, Cleveland, Golden State, stuff like that. So, we'll find out how do they respond to that. Because initially, I mean, they're going to have a losing record initially because of that. And how are they going to respond? Are they going to bicker? Are they going to do this? Are they going to do that? So, it's like you really won't have a clue until like November sometime, like late November, to see what this team is all about.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, Keith. I think we are done with this now. We're talking about the Sixers. Keith, you have got Locked On Sixers happening. What's happening at Locked On Sixers at the moment?
I mean, right now we're going to talk about we're going to dissect Ben Simmons, talk about Embiid's injury, and then just talk about the upcoming season. Just talk about some of the things you and I touched on, but just do a little bit more in depth in regards to the playoff talk, in regards to the hoopla surrounding the Sixers, and then just try to give a more realistic, approach to this season, because a lot of people, and I get the excitement, but a lot of people are kind of like setting themselves up for a little disappointment if they think that this team is guaranteed to be one of the top 5 teams in the East.
Yeah, look, totally with that. Go and listen to Keith on Locked On Sixers. Subscribe to his podcast and subscribe to my podcast, and give us 5-star reviews. That would be fantastic. Either Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Stitcher, Google Play, or Spotify. Keith, thank you for coming on once again and talking about the Philadelphia 76ers in what I hope is going to be a much more exciting season.
Yeah, it will. But hey, thanks for having me on, man. I really enjoyed it.
No worries, Keith. And we are done here, guys. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Ben Simmons.